Meeting with people in person. So it's wonderful to see you here. We will call our meeting to order. And with that, if you will join me in standing to the Pledge of Allegiance, which is the flag is right here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for joining me in that. Next on the agenda is the welcome and the introduction of members. For you that are new to our group, this is one of 50 across the United States that work to help military families transitioning in and out of North Carolina to make sure their educational opportunities are taken care of, or we work through anything that might prevent them from graduating on time or losing credits. So with that, we have a various sundry of folks from around North Carolina and in the military that are with us today. And starting on my left at the far end of the table, if you would just let us know your name and who you're representing, we would certainly appreciate that.
Thank you very much. I'm David Stegall, the Deputy State Superintendent here at the Department of Public Instruction. And this will be the first meeting I've attended as well. Excited to be here and anything we do to support our students, military connected students as well. So thank you.
I'm Representative Raymond Smith, North Carolina House District 21, Wayne and Sampson counties.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Chevelle Godwin from Fort Bragg School Sports Services.
Good morning. I'm Jamie Livengood. I'm the Student and Family Support Coordinator for Wayne County Schools.
Good morning. My name is Gerhard Guevara. I'm with Fort Bragg School Support Services.
Ms. Angie.
I'm Angie Mullinex. I'm the Director of Innovative Practices and Programs, and I'm also our military liaison here at the state.
Good morning. I'm Iris Pierce, School Liaison Officer with Fort Bragg.
Good morning. I'm Donna Grady from Camp Lejeune, School Liaison Officer.
I'm Julie Fulton, School Liaison Officer, Marine Corps Installations East.
Rollie Sampson, Military Liaison Counselor, Moore County Schools.
Good morning. Christy Barnes-Williams, School Liaison at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base.
And for the folks sitting in the back, if you, sir, would be the first one, and then you can hit either side you want. That way we all know who's in attendance today.
Sure. My name is Rob Dietrich. I'm the Director of Digital Teaching and Learning here with the Department of Public Instruction.
Good morning. Ma'am.
Brian Dorn with Seymour Johnson Air Force Base.
Terry McInerney, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base.
Secretary Ariel Ponte for the North Carolina Department of Military Education.
Doug Tiger, Department of Military Veterans.
Rod White, Department of Military Veterans.
Tim Harrell, Assistant Superintendent, Wayne County Public Schools.
Ken Dirksen, Executive Director for Community Engagement and Student Daily Support for Wayne County Public Schools.
I'm George Lane with the North Carolina National Guard Family Program.
Hey, good morning. David Lewis, Superintendent, Wayne County Public Schools.
Good morning. I'm Heather Winstead. I'm Executive Military Liaison Counselor for Wayne County Public Schools.
Good morning. I'm Ann Worth. I'm with the State Board of Education.
Wow, what an audience today. We have everything covered today. That means we get paid big bucks, don't it? I hope you have your Christmas shopping done and you've eaten all the turkey and dressing you needed to get you through to Christmas. Thank you so much for taking part out of your busy schedule to join us today. At this time, I will turn this over to Nick Zoika, who is our Commissioner for North Carolina and our representative to the National Committee, who will introduce the Superintendent for us.
Thank you, Representative Loftus. It's my honor to introduce our State Superintendent, Ms. Katherine Truitt, to you today. And for those of you who may not already be familiar with her background, she brings an incredibly rich range of experience to this important position. She served for many years as an English teacher at the middle and high school levels. Her last years of teaching at nearby West Johnston High School. She served as a school turnaround coach with underperforming school districts, senior education advisor to Governor Pat McCrory, and served as chancellor of the nonprofit Western Governors University, North Carolina. But perhaps most importantly for this group, she is the mother of children enrolled in Wake County Public Schools, and she is a military spouse, as her husband Jeff is a captain in the U.S. Navy Reserve. So would you please help me welcome State Superintendent Katherine Truitt.
so much for that kind introduction. All true. And I think what stands out to me most is the unusual career path that I've had as an educator because I was a military spouse. And although we were active duty for only 14 years and reserves the rest of the time, I'm very familiar with what it's like to have children who are moving around. In our case, in and out of the country while they are in school. And the incredible services that our schools provide military-connected students. And I was heartened to see a couple of weeks ago in Wake County schools where we don't have a lot of military presence in that part of our state. Wake County Public Schools wants to know who among their students is a military-connected student, which I was really thrilled to see. We are, in North Carolina, depending on the day, the third or fourth largest military population in the country. And of course, that military population is concentrated in about the southeastern part of the state. And it's great to see our friends, especially from Wayne County Public Schools, who we've been to visit and had the opportunity to get up close and personal with some jets at the base. And just love the work that all of you are doing to support our military-connected students. A military-connected student their journey will have them switching schools about 6 to 9 times throughout the course of their public education career. And as I said, even before I had children, I was teaching in military communities because of where we were stationed. And it was I always knew when one of my teenagers, usually dad, but sometimes mom, was deploying and then was away. I was stationed near the submarine base as well as a base that had, Bangor had an aircraft carrier. And so we're talking about long deployments that these kids' parents would be away. And it was rough for them. And so I just cannot overstate the importance of the work that you all do. And I know also what it feels like to not be supported, because I've had that experience as well. So I particularly am familiar with the power and need for the work that you do. The transition, the need for a smooth transition and to have a plan in place to support students is paramount. And this compact is going to ensure that is consistent and as supportive for our families as possible. Military families undergo constant change. Change is hard for everyone. No one likes change. I think we moved 3 times the first 9 months we were married. And so for that reason, I'm just so honored to be here in front of the compact today, give it my full support. Dr. Mullenix is also a military spouse and parent. We've got a few on our team here at DPI. And so thank you for all that you do and for making a difference in the lives of families. And I wish I could stay with you, but I duty calls, as they say. So thank you all so much. thank you, Nick, and thank you, Donnie, for your work with the contract.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mr. Soika, do we want to go back and introduce the folks who are online with us as well?
Sure. Let's go ahead and do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're online with us, we are just gonna go down the list that we see here. I see a 9104 something number ending in 81. I'm not sure who that is.
Yeah, that's my name is Mike Scalise. I'm the Assistant Chief of Staff, G7 at Marine Corps Installation East. I work for Julie Fulton. How's that?
That's good. Thank you. And then Brittany.
Good morning, friends. Brittany Norman here, Onslow County Schools. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Brittany. And is that Dennis? My goodness, I might need new contacts. Is that Dennis?
Goodman.
Okay.
Yeah, Dennis Goodson here at Seymour Johnson. I work with Colonel McElhaney and Mr. Joyner, who are in the meeting in person there.
Okay. And then Howard, you with us?
Good morning, Howard Loudmore, Cumberland County Schools, and I work for Nick.
It's the other way around.
All right, Howard. And Valerie, are you on with us?
Yes, Valerie Nasser of Craven County Schools. I'm the military liaison for the district.
All right, and that's everyone. Thank you.
And we did not take the opportunity, Nick, if you'll go first, and then I'll cover and then move on to the next subject.
Okay. Well, just in terms of an introduction, I'm Nick Soika. I'm the board attorney for Cumberland County Schools, but also honored to serve as the North Carolina Commissioner for the Interstate Compact.
And I'm Donnie Loftus. I was appointed in 2013, and by way of not attending the meeting was appointed to be the chair by acclamation, and have been serving in that position since then. And we've come a long way since 2013, not because of me, but because we finally got some foundational things together. And so we're really impacting a lot of folks. At last count, I think it was about 45,000 students that we impact every year through our hard work. Doug Taggart did most of that for many years. Doug, I am so appreciative that you're still engaged and involved. So thank you for being on our team. With that being said, first on our agenda for discussions would be consider military student school transcript issues. Ms. Coltrane, Mr. Dietrich with North Carolina DPI. If you'd like to start, whichever one would prefer to go, the floor is yours.
Sure, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself one more time for the folks online who might not have heard. I am Rob Dietrich. I'm the Director of Digital Teaching and Learning here at DPI. Ms. Coltrane could not make it today, so unfortunately you're stuck with just me. I am here today to discuss transcript issues. I also want to second, though, before I get started, the work you all are doing. I was in the military for 2 years of my very young life when I started, and I think it's extremely important that these students are well taken care of because of the sacrifice that the families have to make. So I am thrilled to be here and present this to you today. My understanding is there are some transcript issues and questions raised about half credits and getting the transcripts to reflect what actually should be when the students come in and transfer into schools here. What I do want to report to you here today, I will be brief, is that we do have a process in the student information system to allow for half credits and allow for those students to get their transcript to be as reflective as possible of what they came in with when they do transfer in from schools. That is really the gist of the conversation that I have here today, unless there are any questions that one may have. Yes?
Is there a QRD document that's on that would explain some of this, because some of the half credit was changed a little bit last year during the COVID?
Yeah, what we do have, the closest thing I think that we have out there is we have a QRD out there about understanding GPA, which explains half credits and how those work. And actually it goes into full credits, half credits, and 2 credit courses because they all reflect differently on the transcript depending on the GPA weight there, to make sure, because
really this conversation is a little bit difficult to understand for folks who don't understand how GPA works. So we do have that out there. Do we have anything specifically? We have QRDs out there about entering historical grades as well, but I don't know we have anything specifically outside of those two things.
I think the original question that was asked
Yes,
was
ma'am.
in light of the change where Power School was putting everything at 1.0 and instead of where you did it yourself, and it seemed that there was
Correct.
at one time that change seemed to be an issue.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. And what we have done, we found a way around that. We now have a process in place that folks, for students who transfer in, and only students who transfer in, not just military connected, but other students as well, that we have a way for them to kind of bypass that, to put in a code, and it actually does something on the transcript as well. It puts a T next to the course code as a flag so that folks understand that this is a transfer credit from out of the state of North Carolina, which I think is very helpful to people in colleges as they read that transcript. I think that was actually something we should have done a while back.
Yeah, that helps greatly.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions?
I think
Yes,
that
sir.
partly answers my question. So if they're moving in from another state, for example, and that state has, in the middle of the school year, and that state didn't provide a half credit, we can't hear.
Okay. I don't know that I can go that far.
Okay.
What I can say in a case like that, having done this for years in Lee County, which is where I see so many familiar faces, where I have done this. Yeah.
To me.
Yeah.
Now,
We had a lot of fun in Moore County.
That's right. Yeah.
now we have a friend in the big building.
Oh, the big building, that's good to know.
We probably shouldn't have jogged all our memories.
No, I probably shouldn't have. But my answer to that is I think you have to look at all these cases as individual cases per student, per local policies, per all policies, to make sure that you get those credits, the most possible things when they transfer in. I don't know that I can answer that blanket because each individual student brings its own individual case.
Who would be the approving authority for that? For those individual cases?
Principal grades and classifies.
Correct.
Yeah.
Principal grades and classify. Now, if you look at the whole big scheme of that, there's counselors involved. I've taken phone calls from other, I've called school districts to say, tell me more about this so that I can get it right, transferring it in. So really it comes down to the principal and the counselors working with the other school, if they can get a hold of them, and making a determination, looking at all the courses they come in, the curriculum they've had versus the curriculum they have in their counties, to make sure that the right credit is awarded.
And also, in addition to that, one of the things that as our military families are transferring in, we also encourage them to bring copies of books or any information that they can regarding those half credits, because we ask them to really study those transcripts and any information that they can when they're transferring in from another state. So school liaison officers will make sure that they have that information prior to coming to any state that they're transferring from.
And I think you brought up, sorry I didn't see your name, my apologies. I think the question you asked is probably the best question, because the most difficult student to monitor is the one that comes in halfway through, and we need to figure out what to do with that student. And again, I think that's a case-by-case basis. I don't know we can blanket that statement.
Wonderful. Any other questions? Thank you so much. Glad to know we have a friend now.
Yes, sir. Anytime.
Next on the agenda is consider the possibility of expanding the compact to include all Guard and Reserve connected students, which I think up until now we really didn't pay a lot of attention to that, but in North Carolina we have a tremendous force on the reserve side, whether it's National Guard or whether it's Army Reserve. So Nick is going to be speaking to that. Nick?
Thank you. This is a subject that I wanted to share with the State Council as follow-up to the National MIC-3 Military Interstate Compact meeting that I attended about a month ago, attended virtually, where this topic received a lot of discussion. I think there were some folks who hoped to actually take some action on this subject at that meeting, but the ultimate result of all that conversation at the national level was to send this issue back to state councils like this one to begin a process of acquiring information so that when the national group meets next November, that as a state, in our case, North Carolina can be heard and have a position that this council would be comfortable with, our state superintendent, DPI, state board, certainly our Guard and Reserve community, all our stakeholders would be able to coalesce behind a position on this issue. I'll just say at the outset, the reason it's an issue, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, is that the way the compact is currently written and the way it's been enacted into law here in North Carolina and the other 49 states is that Guard and Reserve children are covered by the compact only when their parent is on active duty. But as Representative Loftus alluded to, we're one of those states. Not only do we have a lot of active duty military folks, but we also have a very large Guard and Reserve community here in North Carolina. So, this is a real issue for lots of families here in our state. Just to kind of begin a conversation this morning and to begin our reflection on this issue, I thought it would be helpful just to kind of review the basic purpose of the compact, which again, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I think as we consider this issue, it is helpful, and this is what we did at the national meeting, to step back for a moment and consider the overall purpose of this law and our work to support it. And that is basically to make sure that military children are not disadvantaged by frequent moves and transitions between school districts, just as we heard from State Superintendent Truitt in her personal experience. And so from that basic premise, you've got the statutory statements of purpose of facilitating timely enrollment, facilitating the student placement process, facilitating qualification and eligibility for enrollment in educational programs and participation in extracurricular activities, and facilitating ultimately the on-time graduation of children of military families. When that purpose was set out at the national meeting, a lot of conversation ensued then to the effect of, we know we have a lot of Guard and Reserve families, but we don't see them moving around, and so we're not sure that the transitional services and the transitional purposes that the compact is designed to serve, if they're really relevant to our Guard and Reserve families. And there were different views on that from different states. Different folks shared different experiences. So, I'll continue, but I want you all to begin reflecting upon, your personal experience in your home communities, your experience with Guard and Reserve families. I think we just need to process and consider whether, their experience in transitional issues, maybe not necessarily moving between districts, but maybe as a parent is called up, not necessarily for a lengthy deployment, but, some sort of TDY situation. I'm not sure. But as you're thinking about that, just to review where we are in terms of numbers here in North Carolina, and these are the numbers that were reported to the National MIC-3, so hopefully these are pretty current. We've got approximately 43,000 active duty children in North Carolina who are covered by the compact. That translates into approximately $50,000 in annual dues that we pay as a state to be part of the national military interstate compact. That's calculated on an ADM basis. It's certainly not about money, but that is a feature of the number of active duty kids we have here in North Carolina, and we're the fourth biggest active duty state in the country. If we add all of our Guard and Reserve children, that would bring our total of military affiliated children here in North Carolina up to approximately 56,000, another 14,000 kids. And given the current due structure and budget of National MIC-3, that would increase our annual dues as a state by about $15,000 up to $65,000. And I haven't been directly involved in how that money is paid, but under the guidance of Mr. Taggart back there in the back and Representative Loftus, my understanding has been that it's paid out by DPI when we get an invoice annually. Is that basically correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So those are some numbers, another 14,000 kids and their families that would be affected by this change if we were to expand the compact. And just to touch on the mechanics of that, as it was laid out at the national meeting, there are basically two ways to go about doing this. One is to go back to all 50 states with some model language and say, folks, this is recommended action for your individual state legislatures based upon presumably some broad-based consensus of MIC-3 national and the various state councils. And at that point, you wait on 50 states and 50 state legislatures to enact that legislation. There's another way for this change to become effective so that it would be legally binding here in North Carolina, and that would be for our General Assembly to enact standalone legislation, and that actually has happened in Arkansas and Kentucky. And that would not, compromise in any way our obligations under the compact or change those in any way, but it would be more or less a unilateral legislative change started here in North Carolina. So those are the mechanics of how this would happen, but having given you all sort of that wind up, here's the pitch to all of you all who are out in the field every day. Is this an issue as a state council, as a state, that we need to address? Are there unmet needs of our Guard and Reserve families that bringing them formally under the compact would meet? So I open the floor to those of you who work with our families every day.
I feel like they're occasional.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at several different implications, if there's a financial implication, are the occasional ones things that we can handle from, and that will be handled from a district perspective without the legislation? We talk about, is there legislation necessary sometimes or not? So the question becomes, are their needs going to be met if we don't do it? And are they being met currently? Have we had an outcry? I mean, we've had a few scenarios. We have a PCS lottery for one of our application-based schools. We have had a handful probably of inquiries about the PCS lottery for our reservists. And in that scenario, we've had to hammer out those conversations. Do they need what has been set forth for this lottery? Because the purpose of the PCS lottery is to meet the tenets of the compact in the transition process and allowing those students that opportunity just as if they had been here when that opportunity would have been available to them. So that's an example I can think of if we're talking anecdotal information.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead. I have a couple questions. Same as far as the number of cases would be rare, but in the cases that we do have, obviously those families have that need. If North Carolina were to do the legislation on their own, would the cost be incurred? Okay, and if not, then it seems like an easy yes, because it would cover those rare families that did come up. In the event we were looking at something on a national level, I think we would advocate that the cost to the state be lower for the National Guard children because we would deal with so few cases from that overall number compared with the active duty numbers.
was gonna say, you probably have to be very specific on what consists of a transition for a National Guard Reserve family. So even for us, you know, I'm outside of Fort Bragg. I'll get families who are living in Fayetteville and decide to move over to Moore County. The compact does not apply in the enrollment thing because they're not PCSing. There's a difference.
Right.
So, you know, like there are National Guard or reservists who work within a unit, not as a, like under, yeah, as a tech or something, where they might move units even though it's not a PCS move. Like, could we build in those provisions for when that family relocates for those kind of purposes versus, hey, we just want to move to this school district because we want to change our location. And so, and that's different because it's not necessarily a PCS kind of move, you know, but we still need them employed within those organizations. So I think really looking at what those needs are for those families, you know, I think for us, the biggest needs in our schools right now would be behavioral health support. So the Military Family Life Council, the MFLAC program, does not include reservists and National Guardists unless they're on active duty. And so same thing, it doesn't recruit our veterans or our retirees, and we all know that those are high-risk populations as well. So, you know, maybe having legislation at both the state and eventually at the national level might push the Department of Defense to recognize that, you know, we really need to serve all of our military families, not just those that are currently on active duty, and expand those services.
So in the last 10 years or more, the Guard particularly, since I was a member of the Guard for many, many years, used to, you could come into a unit, get promoted in that unit, and max out at that unit, even full-time. And now it is tied to a promotion to a move somewhere else. And most of them aren't that far away from where they currently live, but like you said, in some cases, you're moving to another town to take that promotion, and that is somewhat of a PCS move, but it's not the official language. The other part of that would be the net that we're working with now is reasonably limited to where you are. With 100 counties, there may be others out there, onesie-twosies, but they may add more to, hey, there is a need, not just in Seymour Johnson, Fort Bragg, those areas, but in Watauga County or Swain County or Bertie County, wherever that need is. We may look at, hey, there's a need that we need to fulfill it. And the last point would be, would that be tied, Nick, to any funding coming back for North Carolina? Because if we did the standalone legislation, I wouldn't think they would say, well, let us give you X number of dollars for that.
You're right, yeah, there wouldn't be any money flowing back.
Oh, yeah. I do like the idea that if we did the standalone legislation, it wouldn't impact another $15,000. Not saying that our students aren't worth it, but at the same time, if you only have $1, how far can you get $1.25 out of it? So I like that part of it if we did the standalone legislation to do that. Other comments?
Yes, I absolutely agree. The provisions that you speak of, I think, can be handled if it is a military-related transfer, not just a personal decision. I think it could be covered with just that one statement. If it's an order attached to it,
right,
then I think that's a simple fix. So I think inclusion would be good.
Usually those military orders are you're hereby ordered to.
Yes.
And then there's a rescission of the previous order that now moves into a new unit. So you could kind of tie it to that.
Absolutely.
I believe
subject matter expert.
I believe there are some comments from the attendees.
Sure.
If you'll allow that.
Absolutely.
Hey, since this it's nice to see you guys all again, but I had two kind of points relative to the topic right here. One is I think the compact actually has a cap of how much is paid by each state, unless the National Commission changed that. It used to be $60,000 per state is the upper end of what could be paid by a state on the dues. And second, the thing that came up when I was a military liaison here for the Reserve and Guard were single family situations where there were orders involved, and the child would end up with a non-custodial caregiver out of state. They're not common, but they come up, and that's an issue for the kid, you know, coming to North Carolina to live with grandma to enroll in school when the mother's doing training somewhere else outside the state. So I'd just like to make that a concern in terms of the issue for the compact expanding of the Guard Reserve.
You call that a non-custodial?
Non-custodial caregiver.
Okay.
And we did have some legislation that passed
That should-
regarding enrollment, non-custodial care, et cetera, and that should help with those details that we've had issues with in the past. That was just in the last
Year.
year. Okay.
That's it, thank you.
Mr. Secretary?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Nate, Representative. In talking to Major General Moser, who is the United States Army Reserve Commanding General, any efforts that the state of North Carolina can do to support our military families because of their footprint. We have them, like you stated, the western portion of our North Carolina. One of the biggest challenges is family programs in that military connected. We had a conversation, myself, Secretary Gaskin, we visited all Reserve Command and National Guard, same thing with the National Guard Major General. However, our department, I can champion in that and asking the commanders that question, how will this legislation support you in getting that request for information back out to you, gentlemen? So I can bring on behalf of Secretary Gaskin, we can work with these Commander General Hunt and Major General Moses to ask a question, if the state decides to move forward with legislation, how would this impact your family from a positive or from a negative, so that you got my buy-in on that, sir.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Is there someone else online that wishes to comment for that?
I see any, and then we also have one more within our audience too.
Cool.
Ann Murphy with the State Board. I get a lot of calls from military families because we answer a variety of calls. And one, there are children that have special needs. And I think that also needs to be addressed when you have military families coming in and they have children with special needs, and that can be children on the low end of the spectrum or academically gifted children. So I think when you're doing the legislation, let's consider children with special needs on either end. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann.
Thank you.
I think we're good, but we don't have any online who have requested to.
So if you will allow us, let's roll this together, and with the notes we've taken today, between Nick and myself, we'll roll that up, kind of feed it back out, and see if we met all the things that we kind of discussed. I can tell you, I'd be happy to help sponsor that across the way over there. Probably one of my first bills that I'll file, so that'd work out good. Looking for a great co-sponsor.
You got it.
So this is how sausage is made. So thank you for your comments on that part. Anything else before we move on from there?
Yeah, just the caveat to maybe consider, if you're going to do legislation that would open the compact to other military populations in the state of North Carolina, you might want to consider veterans within a year of discharge. When you think about veterans, they often leave the military. They don't typically have benefits for the whole family. It's a much more difficult transition than a retiring service member, and they are not included in the compact for the first year after separation. I think that's a huge oversight, because it means because a lot of times they have to take a job away from the installation in the community they were living in, and their children do not get that same courtesy that maybe somebody who served 20 years did.
And I know North Carolina's made a huge effort in keeping those here.
You got it, and I think this could go a long way, ensuring that because it could be the same thing. All you're doing is allowing somebody who's a veteran the same courtesy as somebody who retired from the military or was medically retired or is a Gold Star family.
Did you have something you wanted to add?
We're clarifying across the way.
What's in the compact,
Right.
how it's worded.
Because
Right.
it's medically retired,
Gold Star.
Gold Star. Those are the families who are good for a year, but it's not this separation.
Yeah. For those who served 8 years or
Right.
one enlistment or 12 or
And-
whatever.
And that's a great point, because really it's their final PCS, or maybe not final, but it's their last PCS as far as connected to their service. So, yeah, I think that makes sense.
Wonderful. Nick, you good there?
Yeah, I'm good. I appreciate that last point, because that is something, just in my work in Cumberland, I've worked with folks who've been in that situation. So I appreciate that. I think what we'll do, as Representative Waltus alluded to, is we're going to gather our notes and the feedback we received here today, and again, I certainly defer to our legislators who are here as to how they'd like to proceed, but I think it would probably be useful to, have some formal communication back out to our Guard and Reserve command structure within the state. That's one of the recommendations from National MIC 3 to, make sure that they're on board with any proposal to go back nationally or in the form of state legislation. I can also connect our legislators with the folks in Arkansas and Kentucky and at the National MIC 3 level who worked on that legislation, because evidently there's some technicalities that we need to observe so that we don't somehow compromise our participation in the rest of the compact. And then, of course, make sure our state superintendent and state board of education have an opportunity to weigh in and provide feedback. But this is tremendously helpful to me, and I think just exactly the kind of exchange that National MIC 3 wants to see around the country on this issue. So I thank all of y'all very much for the time on that.
Cool.
So,
thank you.
All right.
Next is to receive newly revised North Carolina Boards Association family policy. Is that you also?
That is me also. And
before Nick starts this, I'll have to tell you how happy I am to have a commissioner who is actually getting paid large bucks.
So are we. So much.
We've been here when it hadn't been this good. So we are so thankful you're engaged at this level to make sure we're moving North Carolina forward.
Well, I appreciate your kind words, Representative Loftus. I mean, it truly is my privilege to serve in this position, and I'm humbled thinking about all the sacrifices that our military families around the state make. Excuse me. On this next agenda item, I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of a change in the model policy for children of military families. This is the model policy that I believe certainly all the school districts represented here have access to through the North Carolina School Boards Association. The School Boards Association is really our essential resource for all of our local board policies in public education in North Carolina. And for many years, they have had this children of military families policy on the books. And by extension, it's been adopted, so far as I know, in almost every North Carolina school district. And it has had some important provisions in it. It does require the annual identification of military connected students, the mechanism that State Superintendent Truitt referred to is going forward here in Wake County. It also sets out sort of the short version, a good summary of the compact and the obligations that it puts on our school districts to provide flexibility and cooperation with our military families. Years ago, when I was first working with school districts on compact issues, my advice was always, just concentrate on those two words, flexibility and cooperation. If we get those parts right, we're probably going to be legal, and we're probably going to be doing right by our military families. But what this policy had not included up until recently was some language that would give military families sort of a guide or some direction of where to go and what to do if they raised an issue with their local school district but felt like, they had just kind of run into a brick wall. No offense to the school folks, but, we all know that there are those situations where, maybe at the school principal level or central office level, military family just felt like, we've made all the arguments, we've had all the conversation we had, we're still not happy with where we are, and we believe that, there should be some different result given the requirements of the compact. So some language has been added to this model policy, and this went out to all districts with the School Boards Association's fall update, I believe back in September. Dr. Mullinex or whoever's driving that thing, if we can get to the last page, I think that language is highlighted. There we go. Highlighted there in yellow, there's this new paragraph C called resolution of issues. And what this does is hopefully make clear to our military families and to all of the school system people who might be referring to this policy that, you know, if we have an issue that arises under the compact and the family ultimately is not satisfied with the final administrative decision, they then have available to them the grievance policy, the grievance procedure that, again, all of our North Carolina school systems have, and that is spelled out in this companion School Board Association policy that's referenced here, this policy 1740. And just so you all and whoever's online has an idea of what that grievance policy provides, it says first that there should be an attempt for an informal resolution at the last administrative level where the family had the contact. Maybe that's with the principal, maybe it's with the assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, whatever. So you have that informal piece. But then if the parent is still not satisfied, they can file a written grievance, and a school official, usually somebody at the central office level, then has to meet with them within 5 days. Okay, so this is a device to make sure that these issues don't just get pushed away or fall through the cracks with everything else that's going on in the school business these days. So there's that requirement of that meeting within 5 days, and then the school system must provide a written response within 10 days of that meeting. And it's also possible, depending upon, you know, what the issue is. In fact, it's extremely possible that if the parent is still not satisfied with the response, they ultimately have a way to get in front of their local Board of Education with a board hearing. Not necessarily with all the board members. A lot of boards do these with panels of maybe 2 or 3 board members to hear it. But this language, by incorporating and referencing that policy 1740, the grievance procedure, really gives our military families, I think, a valuable tool that they can use on their own with their local school systems to make sure that their issues are heard, and that they, although, you know, there's certainly no guarantee that they'll all be satisfied in the end, that they certainly have full due process, as we would say, in the court system before there is a final decision. And then the other thing about this language, it also references the ability of folks maybe in my position or Dr. Mullinex here at DPI to also intervene informally, and it provides contact information there. We know that just through institutional history that military families will contact people in my position. They'll contact people in Dr. Mullinex's position, Doug Taggart before her, and that's referenced in here as well. So just wanted to highlight that for you. School districts handle their policy and their policy adoptions differently, but I just want to make sure that the folks at this table and are online are aware of this policy change. It is something that your local folks should have had their hands on going back to the fall. If it hasn't already made it into your local policy manual, that may be something you may want to talk to the appropriate person in your central services or at your board level to see that happens. Any questions about that? I want to thank the good folks at the North Carolina School Boards Association who vetted all this language. I mean, it's sort of like changing the law. When you change one of these policies, you never want to create unintended consequences. But they vetted this language, and then we're happy to, send it out as part of their update package and as a recommended policy change for all North Carolina districts. So kudos to the School Boards Association. Anything else on that?
I know that's something we've talked about for several years of trying to get some clarification. So thank you, School Board Association and Nick, for your hard work on making that happen without any unintended consequences, which is the hard part.
We've already worked on making it policy. In fact, we're going to be removing other policies because that was so well written. We don't need these other local policies anymore because it's all wrapped up there really nicely.
Right.
Just one more, like a house cleaning note that the board might want to consider is we now need to make sure we always add Space Force when we do all of our branches of service. So, I know, but yes.
Point well taken. Do we have Space Force
I've had
folks
some people
stationed
transfer
here in North Carolina?
I've had
Is
some
that-
transfer in, but I don't know that we have any Space Force units yet. I know that Raleigh at one point had been on the short list for locations.
Right.
So you never know when they start expanding.
Right.
And we
Okay.
do have special operations that do joint.
Right.
Yeah,
Operations.
that could be coming.
Sure.
But it's
Good.
actually DPI has already updated it in the Power School, so it is
Right.
an option in Power School.
Very good.
So they're on it.
All right. Well, that will conclude that item,
Cool.
Mr. Chairman.
Next is receive information regarding the Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Wayne County Public Schools On-Base School Initiative with Mr. Joyner and Deputy Base Civil Engineer and Dr. David Lewis, Wayne County Public Schools Superintendent. So, Jamie, are these friends from home?
Yes, these are my people.
Well, there's nobody left in Wayne County today. They're all here.
And we're all gonna have a Wilbur's barbecue lunch, right?
I'm sorry, did you bring that with you?
No, sir, that was not in the email that I received.
You fax it to us, would you?
Well, good morning. I am David Lewis, Superintendent of Wayne County Public Schools. We have some other folks here with us today from the base and from the school district. Where did you guys go? So later when you have questions, if you have questions, we think we've got the right people here to answer them when the time comes. Some of you will be hearing this information for the first time. This is a new concept for you, the Wayne School of Technical Arts on the campus of Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. Others of you are more familiar, and so this will be an update for you. I will try not to be too repetitive for those of you who have heard it before, but we're pretty excited to talk about this thing every chance we get. So don't be surprised if I run a little long, okay? Just give me a signal if I'm starting to get out of hand on this thing.
If your mic goes dead.
If the mic goes dead, I know my time is up. Right?
I can tell you, being a new member of the House, when someone is speaking for an extended period of time, and if you look at the queue, that's the number of speakers who want to speak.
I see.
You'll see it go up.
I see.
And that's your cue to shut up. So, as soon as that person quits talking, the queue goes right back down. So.
Very good, very good. Well, to give you a little bit of background, basically 1 year ago, in December of 2020, the Wayne County Board of Education, the Board of Commissioners, and leadership of Seymour Johnson Air Force Base entered into a memorandum of understanding to look into the idea of a collaborative relationship to basically place a public school on base. Basically, the memorandum of understanding had language in it that basically said that we thought it was a good idea and worth exploring. So we set upon that. We started considering curriculum and programming offerings. The base started looking at facilities that might be made available to us. We started to dive into what it would take to establish that school, who would we serve, who's our target population. The presentation I'll go through with you today sort of gives you an overview of what we came up with in the 6 months or so after that MOU was signed. And I am pleased to tell you that on June 7th, our board took official action to say, let's do it. So we've applied for a school number, we're waiting on that, things like that. So we are in progress and planning to open coming soon. Fall of 2022 is our target opening date. For curriculum and programming planning, we wanted this school to be different. Wayne School of Technical Arts will offer students a STEM-themed education with technical course offerings as well as advanced placement courses. We felt it was important to offer a rigorous course of study for those who wanted it, along with career and technical education options that were forward-thinking, and I'll get into a little bit of that with you shortly. The core academic program at WSTA will meet all of the North Carolina career and college-ready requirements, including math, science, social studies, English, and world languages. And students will have the opportunity for the first time in Wayne County to pursue the AP Capstone Diploma Endorsement. We are not currently doing that in any of our schools. We'd like to be. We think that this is a good place to try it out and see if we can get to that point. AP Capstone, you may or may not be aware, includes a series. You have to take a series of AP courses. The students have some options with that, things that are of interest to them. But there's also a pretty significant research component to that with a final product that is to be produced through the use of a mentor. We like the idea of AP courses and AP Capstone because they are recognized nationally and internationally. Superintendent Truitt spoke to the mobile nature of some of our students. A lot of you have alluded to that. We want them to earn credits and credentials that will travel with them wherever they go, because we know that even if they start with us, they may or may not finish with us. All right, so there's that component to it. Next slide, please. When fully populated, we will serve 420 students in grades 6 through 12. That is intentional. We are modeling this after another successful program that's already up and running. The Wayne School of Engineering has received several honors at the state level and consistently earns accolades for their work on the campus of Goldsboro High School. So our student population is designed to be small. It's designed to be very personalized, very hands-on. The difference here, though, will be our target group of students. Of those 420, 50% will purposely be military connected. All right, could be active duty, could be National Guard, could be any other definition of military connected. We've sort of left that to the base to decide what they believe the definition of military connected should be, and whether or not there should be any proportionality within that 50%. Is it geared more towards active duty, more towards any of the other? We'll go through a lottery process to identify that 50%. The other 50% will be Wayne County Public Schools at large. Okay, we think it's important that this school be representative of the community as a whole. Wayne County right now, Wayne County Public Schools, we have military connected students across the entire county. They are no longer concentrated in one area or another, and so we just believe in offering this opportunity to our countywide residents as a whole. So 50% military connected in some way and 50% county at large. In the fall of 2022, we intend to open 3 grade levels, grade 6 at the middle school level, grades 9 and 10 at the high school level. We would then each subsequent year fill in 1 middle school grade, 1 high school grade, until finally in year 3 we are fully populated. After that, we will only conduct a 6th grade lottery to fill the slots of all the seniors that graduated, move everybody up. There are some provisions by which we can fill vacant slots left behind by kids whose families PCS out. We do not want this school to suffer any loss of student numbers just based on the fact that someone got orders and had to leave. So there's a process to backfill at other grade levels. We currently do that in some cases now with the other lotteries that we run. Students in grades 6 through 8, we are taking an integrated curriculum approach. We would offer humanities, so that's a combination of English, language arts, and social studies. And then math and science would be integrated courses as well. Our CTE offering for our middle grade students would be based on the Minecraft computer programming sequence, introductory level for 6th graders, intermediate for 7th graders, and advanced for 8th graders. We're hoping that this generates interest among them in some of the other high school level offerings that I'll talk about in just a little bit. But this would be the first formal attempt at coding and computer science in Wayne County. So we think this has a lot of potential, not only for the students that attend here, but perhaps it becomes our test case to see whether or not the interest is there in some of our other middle schools as well. In grades 9 through 12, students will continue their studies with core offerings to include pre-AP courses in math, science, and history, and prepare them for success in AP capstone programs that include AP seminar, AP research. For STEM-related fields, on the next slide, we are focusing on digital design and animation, game art design, and drone technology. Those were chosen purposely because they align with opportunities at our local community college after graduation, and we think that there's actually maybe some opportunity for collaboration before graduation, whether it's through some sort of dual enrollment option where kids might be able to experience both the community college level experience and what we can offer in high school at the same time, or maybe they work in sequence with each other for kids who decide that they'd like to pursue advanced credentials in that. Of course, we like the idea of having access to any resources on the base at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, and that excites us very much. And again, we think the opportunity to collaborate with Wayne Community College will be there so that kids can leave us with earned articulated credits, transfer credits, and industry credentials. The next slide I will tell you will not allow us to view online the digital resources that were available. I learned yesterday afternoon that blue underline there is a broken link at this point. So I brought with me copies of what's on the other end of that link, so when we fix it, the community as a whole will be able to see it, but you guys can kind of get a look at this when you get a chance. The broken link leads you to some more in-depth materials related to the curriculum for Wayne School of Technical Arts. You'll actually see course sequences that we believe will happen. What would a typical 6th grader take? What would a typical 9th grader take? And so forth. So that you can see that there's a plan for kids to operate and matriculate seamlessly through a logically thought out course of study. Let's see. Other materials you might find there would be what we believe would be our staffing plan for the first year. How many teachers will it take? How many how many teachers will it take and what will they teach? Of course, that will grow year after year. You should have a sheet at the end of that link when it becomes active, but it's in your folder now, about the impact this will have on our other schools. One of the concerns that was raised when we first started looking at that is, well, if you're pulling students out of our schools to go to the base, what's going to be the impact on those schools? What we've been able to demonstrate is that by grade level, the impact on those schools will be minimal. Probably no more than 3 to 4 students per school per grade level at most of our schools. But the benefit for those that come together on base will be tremendous, we believe. So we think it'll be worth any of that. We also, as a side note, think that this is an opportunity to draw in kids that don't currently choose us. We think we have a large military-connected population that currently choose others. They choose other districts, other charters, other privates. We think that this is the sort of program that might attract a military-connected student who doesn't currently come to us. All right, so that's another goal. You'll have there in your folder and on the end of that link a sample application for what a family might have to fill out and submit to be entered into the lottery. This is modeled after 2 successful lottery programs we have going now with the Wayne School of Engineering, Wayne Early Middle College High School. So this is not that we're not really having to recreate anything. We've got successful choice options up and running now. This will just take a different curriculum focus and serve a different population of students. So far, as I mentioned, we were approved by our local Board of Education in June of 2021. We've applied for our school number through the Department of Public Instruction, and we're waiting to hear back on that. As soon as we hear from DPI that our school number has been approved and we're a go, we will begin to advertise among parents, put out information, hold information sessions and such to start attracting our students. We have had several joint planning sessions and site visits with appropriate base staff. The base has been fantastic. I cannot say that enough. Seymour Johnson has identified for us what probably is the perfect facility, and you'll see some pictures of that coming up in the presentation. It actually used to be their own base education center, so it's very well equipped for us to get up and running. Mr. Joyner has been great to work with and trying to help us identify what in that facility might be shared space versus which of those spaces might be ours, which might remain theirs. But the joint effort is there, and we're getting great support from the base. Seymour Johnson is working now to secure any federal permissions that are needed. You know, they don't just let anybody on base anytime you feel like going, okay? So the idea that 420 kids and any parents associated with that, any teachers associated with that, that I think might have felt daunting, but the base has not made us feel that way. The base has made us feel like, okay, yeah, we can make that work. You know, there's going to be some hoops we have to jump through, but we can get it done. I think base leadership is very excited about this opportunity. They've told us over and over again, tell us what you need, we'll help make it happen. We've said the same thing back to them. We're working right now to finalize a lease agreement. I think it's worth mentioning that when you think about a lease agreement, you often think about rent. The base is working to try to get us this facility with little or no rent attached. I think the responsibility on our part would be for things like utilities, routine maintenance and upkeep based on wear and tear that we're responsible for. Logical things that make sense. I think the base has made it very clear to us from the beginning, they're not looking at this as a way to generate revenue for the base. They're trying to help us out as much as they can. We also are trying to be reasonable in what we ask for from the base. For example, a couple of the areas that are in the facility that's been identified are being used right now to run really good programs for military-connected students, families that live on base. There's a great library there. We don't want them to lose access to that. We want the families that live and come and go from the base to still have access to that great library. So we're trying to be reasonable in what we ask for, and they're being very reasonable in what they expect in return. We are working to finalize the lottery process, and we're working to produce parent and student information materials. I can tell you that since the first time this idea was discussed publicly, there's been a lot of buzz about this school. Superintendent Truitt mentioned that she had visited Seymour Johnson. The purpose of that visit was to come take a look at this facility. She brought a number of her leadership team folks with her and got information from us about what this might look like when all is said and done. And I think there's a lot of excitement. In fact, we've sort of had to tamp it down because people were sort of talking about it as if it were a done deal before our board ever signed off or before we ever get permission to actually do it from the feds. So we're trying really hard to keep our excitement under control, but I think as you listen to me speak, you know that's becoming more difficult. Okay, the closer we get to springtime, which is when things will really heat up. I do have for you in the presentation a little bit of an overview of the facility itself. This used to be Seymour Johnson's Education Center, and in that we've identified 16 potential classrooms, 17 teacher planning and workspaces. And you might wonder why the teachers need planning and workspaces. We're trying to make it the most use of the facilities we can, so we're going to use a college model. The kids won't go to the teachers will go to the kids. We don't want empty classrooms sitting in this wonderful facility. So to max out and use that facility and those classroom spaces as efficiently as we can, get the most kids we can in there, the teachers will actually work out of small office spaces the way a college professor might, and he or she will just go to the room that they're assigned to in a given period. Only exception to that might be some sort of a special purpose room like a science lab, something like that. But in the end, we don't see a lot of unutilized space in the parts that we'll take over. A couple of small conference rooms, plenty of office space. We've got identified space for meal service. We believe we'll use another one of our public schools that is close by, either Meadow Lane Elementary School that sits right outside the base gate, or Greenwood Middle School, which is essentially across the street. We'll use their kitchen to prepare meals as needed, have them delivered, and there'll be a space for the kids to sit and eat without having to worry about staffing a full-blown dining hall there in that building. We are, like I said, developing a shared use agreement, and we're trying to figure out what's going to be the best way for us to handle those general maintenance services. Is it for us to just pay our part of whatever the base does now, or is it for us to try to do some of that through our own staff? Should we put one of our custodians there as the day porter, the caretaker, so to speak? A few pictures are in there for you. That's the exterior of the facility. Beautiful facility for our kids and families to take advantage of. There are some sample classroom pictures in there. One of the things I'll share with you is that the base has said, look, any of this furniture you can use, let's leave it in there. They're trying to make it as easy as they can on us to get this program up and running. I think when you look at some of the photographs and some of the furniture in that building, you'll see that it was designed for adult learners. This was their adult education, where the airmen and women would take community college classes or earn certifications and such. Because we're going to use part of this building for younger students, grades 6, 7, and 8, we may want to trade out some of that furniture for more collaborative style, more kid-friendly things. But in order for us to get up and running, we have what we need. All of that will be things that we can worry about after the fact. The next 2 slides give you an example of how that building would be used. It's a 2-story facility. So right now, shaded in the peach color, those would be shared spaces. Another reason we would not put our teachers assigned to a specific classroom is that Seymour Johnson may want to have night classes in that building still. We want them to be able to do that if they can. Okay, so the classroom spaces would sort of stay basic. Shaded in green, you would see spaces that would be exclusively ours, and then shaded in blue would be exclusively Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. And so like the large room there you see on the first floor, that's that library I was talking about. So that kind of gives you an overview there. There will be some budget impacts for us, and I'll tell you, we're a little farther along on that than we were the last time I provided an update for any of you who have heard this before. But we still don't quite have it all figured out because there are too many variables at this point. We know that there are going to be some startup costs, things that have to be done before the school even opens, things like network infrastructure. That facility was designed for and primarily uses wired networks. Plug it into a data port. We now rely almost solely on wireless in our buildings for our student devices, as you can imagine. And so we would want to go in and put in our own network infrastructure, voice over IP telephones, things like that. But we don't see that as being a barrier. We will provide computer equipment for students and staff the same as we would if they were in any other facilities for Wayne County Public Schools. That's our responsibility. We talked about possibly a science lab. There's not a science lab in that building now. So as soon as we can finalize a lease agreement, we're committed to going into one of those rooms that we can agree on with the base, equipping it properly with running water and the appropriate furniture for a science lab, safety features, eye wash station, the whole 9 yards to make sure that we can offer any science class that we need to. There will be a little bit of furniture to provide, but not much, I don't think. And then there'll be some teacher professional development. I mentioned pre-AP, advanced placement, AP capstone, and the CTE courses. We will have to make sure that our teachers that we hire to teach in that building and to lead those programs have been through appropriate professional development so that they do it well. And that'll be something that the teachers who are hired there have to agree to, and they'll be ready. We know that there will be some staffing issues that we need to handle, certified and classified, and we also know that there will be some annual operational cost that will come with that, the lease agreement, maintenance, transportation services. I haven't talked about that very much, but we're committed that any student that needs a bus to get to that campus, we would provide it for them. We're fortunate to have already 2 programs for which we run specialized bus routes. The Wayne School of Engineering and the Early College actually run on a different schedule, and we pick kids up from all over Wayne County, drop them off. We think we're going to be able to piggyback off of those existing routes and just add to them so that we can maximize our efficiency, but it won't be free. The last few pages sort of get into our cost estimates for now. It was a little bit easier to estimate the startup costs because we've actually priced some of that stuff out and come up with what we think is a reasonable estimate for that. We think we'll end up spending somewhere in the neighborhood of $900,000 to get this school up and running. Most of that has to do with equipping the building. Those are one-time costs, and then a little bit on professional development. The bigger impact, the long-term impact, is those recurring costs. Salary and benefits for the support staff that we'll use. You all know that when you have a new school, you're going to have a bookkeeper, a data manager, a custodian. In our case, because we're going to serve high school kids, we'll need a distance learning facilitator. Those are things that all of our schools have, and because we're adding a school, those will be additional positions. We'll have to account for that. Salary and benefits for an instructional support staff. We intend for them to have a full-time school counselor over there. I don't expect our overall county-wide enrollment to increase by enough to provide that through the traditional state funding formula. Okay, so I have to account for the cost of salary and benefits for an additional school counselor. We believe it may take as many as 3 additional certified staff at least to get up and running. Small schools like this, by their nature, are inefficient. Okay, in my head, mathematically, the perfect size for a school is 1,000 kids, because a lot of the state formulas are sort of driven by 1 for every so many students in here, or 1 for every so many students in there. This school won't be big enough to maximize out of state dollars all that it will need. Okay, so we're going to have to account, at least early on, for the fact that we'll need extra above and beyond what we get from the state for CTE and core area instruction. We hope that that's a short-term problem. We hope that as the school fills up and becomes a little bit more efficient, we see enough impact in other areas. We are already learning to share CTE staff, for example, among multiple schools. Maybe this middle school offers it in the fall and this middle school offers it in the spring. So we've learned over the last few years that we can't offer everything everywhere at every time. Okay, so we're learning to be more efficient there, but we would certainly benefit from any additional teacher allotment, instructional support staff allotment we could get. And then transportation services and the other routine stuff, the utilities, the routine maintenance, those are the great unknowns right now. We won't know how much transportation will cost until after the fact. We don't know who's coming and we don't know where they live. Okay, and until we get that information, and we'll be 6 months in before we know the impact on transportation. And Representative Smith's nodding his head because he used to help us out with transportation in Wayne County many years ago, so he knows the ins and outs of that. But all in all, we don't see anything in terms of budgeting for that school that scares us. We don't see anything that makes us think it's not worth doing, or we can't afford it, or it's not worth figuring out how to afford it. Obviously, any support that we could get at the state level or the federal level would be appreciated. I will tell you that the folks that are here from the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs have been on board from the beginning. What do you need? How can we advocate for you? We're very appreciative of that. So at this point, we're moving forward. We're rolling. We're going to get this school up and running. Any changes that could be made, any help that would be provided, either at the state, federal, or local level would certainly be appreciated. Are there any questions you have for us about what we have in mind, or anything that the folks from the base or my area, my district can provide for you today?
Are you going to be able to use any of your ESSER 3 funds?
Yes.
Part of the plan?
Yes. Well, yes. I will say ESSER in general. Anything that we can do for any other student or school in Wayne County Public Schools will apply here. And because those funds carry over through the next multiple years, the school will be up and running. We also think we may be able to leverage some federal E-rate dollars. E-rate, of course, is the program that allows us, or that helps us outfit our schools with appropriate network infrastructure. Okay, and so once we actually sort of get into that lease agreement and get kids in the building, we believe we'll be able to use federal E-rate dollars to help with that infrastructure cost getting up and running. E-rate right now says to us, if the school, you can't spend E-rate dollars on students you don't already have. Okay, so you run into it when you are building a new school. You can't use E-rate funds to outfit new construction, all right, because the students aren't in the building yet. So we're sort of having to bide our time a little bit on that. It may be that we do that network infrastructure in phases. And phase 1 is we get our foot in the door and start populating with kids. And then maybe there's phase 2 after the fact when we qualify for that federal E-rate. Yes, sir.
Just curious about the physical access to the facility by students and parents. Just, don't want to, compromise security or anything, but I'm just curious whatever y'all can share, just how that would work as a practical matter. And then the other question I had, will the students be able to participate in extracurriculars, sports, all
Yes.
that kind of stuff?
Yes, sir. I'll take the second question first. It's the easiest one. We intend to partner this school at the high school level with Eastern Wayne High School. Eastern Wayne High School, actually, when I was growing up 100 years ago, Eastern Wayne High School was where all the military-connected kids went. And over time, even though the military-connected population is more scattered over Wayne County, they still have that reputation as, military-friendly, base-friendly. We'll follow the same model that we use now with the School of Engineering in Goldsboro High. They play sports together. High School Association recognizes them as one athletic program. I believe, Dr. Harrell, we've already been told by the association they'll do the same thing for us with School of Technical Arts. We don't know yet about middle school athletics, whether or not there'll even be an interest. When Wayne School of Engineering opened, they did not offer middle school sports, and there was no connection with another middle school to make it happen. It wasn't until probably, year 5, year 8, that the principal came and said, I really would like to just go ahead and start fielding middle school teams. My kids need something to do. And so they handled it in-house, basically. So the short answer is yes. Scheduling is tricky sometimes because they won't necessarily operate on the same hours of operation, but Goldsboro and School of Engineering had managed to figure it out successfully. We believe we'll learn lessons there. Your other question was around access to the base. One of the things that we have to do a great job of is making sure that anybody who applies for that lottery because they think they want their student to go understands what comes with that. There's not any just stopping by the office. There's not any just let me go check on him today, or he forgot his lunch. I'm going to bring his lunch to him and leave it with the receptionist. We don't expect that. That's an awfully big ask for the base. So parents are going to have to know what they're getting themselves into. We also have to know what we're getting ourselves into. So, for example, in cases where a student gets to school in the middle of the day, he's not feeling well. How do we handle that? Normally, I send the kid to the office and say, call your mom, tell her to come pick you up. All right? We're going to have to figure that out and make sure that we've got a way to get that student to a place that's accessible to the parent. We are fortunate to have 2 schools in very close proximity. Meadow Lane, literally, there's a fence separating base property from Meadow Lane. It's right outside the base gate, okay? And then Greenwood Middle is across the street. We may end up using some spaces in those 2 schools for transportation drop-off and pick-up. Mom's not going to be able to drop her son off at the door to the school. We may have to have sort of a shuttle system where parents who have access to our campuses bring them to a centralized location, and then we shuttle them over in some method that's approved by the base, okay? Same thing for things like parent-teacher conferences. I have a hunch that, we've all gotten better at virtual, but there are some things that you just need to sit down and have a face-to-face conversation with somebody. We have spaces in Meadow Lane Elementary School that can be used for that. If the parents can't get to us, we can make a reasonable attempt to get to the parents.
That sounds like an amazing step.
I believe we've had a really good working relationship with Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. This is my 19th year in Wayne County, and all I remember is the positives, okay? But when I tell you that this is not just responding to a need, this is not just reactive, this is proactive, this is innovative, this is a game changer for us. The opportunity to actually have a school on base and have our kids exposed to that at such an early age, this is a win-win for us.
It's a very positive presentation. Thank you for making it that way. Even though we all know there's going to be some barriers,
there will be.
We figure out how to make those go away and work together with and build some future for America's heroes through that program. That's a great win for everybody.
Dr. Lewis.
Yes, sir.
Can you talk about what your financial ask is going to be? Because Representative Loftus and I are going to have to address that from a legislative perspective.
Yeah, you probably are. If you were to ask, so if you're asking me what can you do to help, okay? Any sort of any sort of appropriation earmarked for that school will help. I don't expect anybody to pass legislation or come up with a grant that says, here's this money for Wayne County Public Schools, and that's it. I want it to say, for the Wayne School of Technical Arts. I want people to know that if they make it happen so that we're getting some financial support for this, they can trust, and there's accountability on our end to make sure that that donation, that contribution, that effort is being used as intended. I think that's reasonable for us. I've shared with you that little bit of information of what I think the annual recurring costs will be. I don't know if maybe some of the language in the state allotment policy manual, which I know is based on legislation, could help. For example, I talked about CTE. Could it just have some language in there that says there will be an additional 10 months of employment for CTE to account for districts who have joint programs with military bases? Right? Because the other thing is, if that legislation right now is written for Wayne, you're going to have to go back and do it again, because I already know the folks in Cumberland, you're going to want to do this. Craven's going to want to do this. Right? You give us 2 years to get this thing up and running and come take a visit, and you guys are going to want to do this. And so,
reoccurring or one time?
Reoccurring.
He wants reoccurring.
Well, think about it like this.
We have very deep pockets. We have very short arms.
Think about it like this. Think about the kinds of things that are reoccurring costs, okay? Staffing is a reoccurring cost. Transportation is a reoccurring cost. I would almost say to you, we'll handle the one-time stuff. We'll get it up and running if we can just get some help making sure that it's appropriately staffed. That for me is the big, appropriately staffed with qualified people is my biggest
Did you have that
concern.
on the slide, staffing cost?
I did, I think.
Could you go back to that? Just so we
Sure,
have.
I believe it was slide number
We're just trying to be
17.
very proactive in the future.
Yeah, so both 16 and 17 have some staffing related. Slide 16 and 17. Oh, I'm sorry. That's not true. Slide 17 gets at the staffing. I talked about those 4 classified positions that you need at every school. And so when you add a building, you got to be a +4 because you didn't close anywhere. Okay, so that's a big deal. And then I talked about the certified instructional support. The school counselor is going to be very important. And probably as much from a compact standpoint as anything. Livengood's over there shaking her head.
Yes.
Think about the issues y'all
Yeah,
talked
there
about
was
around
a-
this table before about transcripts and half credits and all of that. Well, if half of this program is military connected kids, a qualified school counselor is going to be huge. Okay, going to be huge. But I don't want to take counseling services away from any other school. I won't lose enough kids at any one school to make up for this student body as an aggregate.
Sure.
So, this proposal is somewhat similar to what we do when we open an early college or redesign high school, which there's an initial allotment to account for these small school funding. And I wonder if it might be worth reviewing how that's funded and use similar language that way, but connect it to innovative programs around military connected communities. It could use similar language, but focused on where you could expand it outside of Wayne County if other schools applied it. I think we have a model we can work off of to give you the language that would be amenable to the
We looked at the language around cooperative innovative. Okay, so School of Engineering that I've talked about a little bit and Wayne Early Middle College High, both are cooperative innovative high schools. The missing link for us, the reason why we didn't feel like this really qualified as that was because of the outward partnership with the community college. This partnership's with Seymour Johnson Air Force Base primarily. We think there will be some community college interaction, the same as any other high school, but I didn't think we had enough built in for us to be able to honestly say this is going to be a partnership, and Wayne's just as in it as we are. That would be an oversell on my part. That would be overstating it. But to your point, the language around cooperative innovative is a great place to start, because if this is not cooperative innovative, I don't know what is.
For the funding piece as well.
Correct. Yes, sir.
There's an initial allotment you receive when you have, I think that same need is what you're looking at, that initial startup cost and the recurring that goes along with that. It'll at least give you a template to review as a possible.
That's right.
Would it be possible for you,
to run that, at least have a clearinghouse through Nick. So he's the kind of keeper of that, so that Nick could help us to make sure as we move forward down the road, we get it right the first time instead of having to come back and dust it, make it a little more clear. So that's a great tool.
Yep.
It's a great program.
And one other thing to consider, Rowan Salisbury is a restart school district where you have specialized funding, and there's some language around how that was worded. It might be worth reviewing how that legislation was passed. It's not this same issue per se, but it does give you a template of how, again, the GA was open to approving specialized funding. That is unique. This is definitely a unique approach, but I think theirs was, it was funded in a 5-year cycle, so it wasn't in perpetuity, but it got you some of that recurring cost, and maybe after the fact you have to come back with deliverables to maybe to renew it. It's just thinking out loud. We don't have to start from scratch. You wouldn't have to start.
Wonderful.
I think there's been a lot of promising conversations. You know, North Carolina has representatives and the governor have spoken openly about wanting to be the most military-friendly state in the U.S. Well, if we can get something in place like that, that not only breaks down a barrier but actually promotes collaboration, like what we've talked about, that would be tremendous. That would be certainly a step towards establishing North Carolina as an incredibly military-friendly state.
One other thing, Dr. Lewis, there were some discussions earlier about legislation. There were some barriers related to the agreements between the city.
Removed.
It's already taken care of. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that's been taken care of.
All right. Good enough. Good enough. One last thing I have, the school code. I understand that it takes a significant amount of time. Is there any way to find out where we are with that?
Dr. Stigall,
school
do you know
number?
about the school
Yeah,
code
the school
that
number.
they applied
School
for,
number.
the school number? He's asking.
Until today, this is the first I've heard of it, but it doesn't come through me. But I can check with Alexis Shaw,
Okay.
Financial Business Services processes that. There's
Didn't know who to check with. We put our application in Eddie a month or so ago, maybe 6 weeks, and I'm not sure.
I think the application was put in August.
It wasn't quite in August.
It was not? Okay.
No, sir. I take that back. Been a long time since August.
Yes.
But we did enter it in Eddie, and it shows us pending.
So we can check, before you get to that, we'll check the
Okay,
process.
that would be great. I appreciate that. Sure do. All right. Anything else? I
Thank
can
you
do for
so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank all of you folks for supporting this and being here. And Jamie, doing a great job in your county, by the way.
We got great.
We raised her well.
That's right, that's
We
right.
raised her well.
Doug?
Got a question. It may not make sense to do this, but thinking about it as a model in the future for a school like this, would it make sense to look at maybe having some doctoral students do research on how this is set up over the first few years to kind of guide it as a model down the road? Just a question. I'm not sure that does make sense to do something like that.
We just talked about trying to get this to be used as a model. We could do it Lejeune and Cherry Point, and here's how to do it correctly. So that may be something we want to throw in there to get the.
We have a teacher of the year starting.
So I'm sorry to keep interjecting.
That's okay. Hey, we've never had this kind of conversation with DPI till
We've just
today.
developed a Office of Learning, Recovery, and Acceleration, and in that division, they have a research arm. We at the department never had a research arm at all. And so we've actually reached out to the 18 state universities and said, are there projects that we are interested in, like this will be a project we'd be interested in collecting data on, analyzing, and having scholarly research done with it. The universities themselves are looking for projects to do research on because they have to maintain their tier one status, many of them. So we very easily could at least communicate to Pitt or whoever may be the most local university that might want to be participant. We could possibly have a partner for that. So to answer your question, we're doing the same thing. As we're doing new projects, we want to collect research to make sure, is this working? How do we? Not everybody trusts the Department of Public Instruction, just like everybody trusts the other state agencies. So we don't want to be just because we said, I told you so,
Well, don't get offended. They don't trust the GA.
I don't get offended. My wife doesn't even trust half the stuff I tell her, so I wouldn't expect people that don't know us, but we certainly are looking at research partners, so I think we can definitely do that.
So just to kind of hit on that, there wouldn't be funding required in the legislation to add a little bit of money for research versus the funding available in your new research department?
What we propose to universities is kill two birds with one stone. They need things to do research in. We can connect them to schools that would be open, which otherwise they might not get a foot in the door to a principal or school district or superintendent. But if we connect them, they have a foot in the door, cost them nothing, cost us nothing, we both benefit. So I don't know that any.
That's a great sale. Costs nobody nothing.
Yeah, we have great relationships with our UNC system schools. You know, I'm a graduate of Fayetteville State's Education Leadership Program, and I know that they would love to jump on. Heck, I wish I had done my dissertation on something like this.
I can imagine some military-connected doctoral students might be very interested in something like this.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Cool. Wow, see those great ideas we just kind of come together and talk about. That's wonderful.
Progress in the house. One other question I had, we wanted to also consider for a school like this and the special nature of it, some type of calendar flexibility. Now, you know, we have a big problem with that in the General Assembly, but
well, you can get a snow relief for the mountains, so you know,
but I wanted to make sure we took that into consideration.
carve-out.
Yeah, absolutely.
This actually has come up at NCMAC before, and several years ago, we made the recommendation that they consider maybe any school district that was 10% military connected, that they do, they call it, they talk about making it like the Patriot Act or a Patriot, school, that they could align their calendar year so they could finish before semester, because for military kids coming in and out, that is one of our biggest challenges, is that out of sequence testing and things like that, especially at the high school level. And so for us, from a military school perspective, that would be so beneficial for the schools surrounding Fort Bragg, Lejeune, all of us, because we could make sure those military families, because you know when they move in summer and over that holiday break, and it means that those students don't miss out on college opportunities to take the community college classes, because we could align our dates with when community college. So from our perspective, from our superintendents and all that, we would greatly support that, and I'm sure the installations would more than support that, since K-12 education is such a huge retention hot point right now for the military community.
So that may be a place to start.
Yes.
And maybe open the door up for those other ones, but I can see 113 other districts going, what about me at some point? And the school flexibility has been around the legislature for longer than a week.
Well, in the innovative cooperative schools language and funding that Dr. Segal referred to, isn't there flexibility already written into that if you're using that as a model, question mark?
There is some. I'd have to
If you're
review the
going back to that. So.
Cool. However, we can help leverage those things that are already in place, we want to do that. It's a great presentation. Good. Anything else concerning this project? And so if we can kind of aim those comments back or the information back towards Nick, who can kind of be send those out when we get them together, that would be most helpful rather than 17. You got something else? 17 different conversations going on. Oh, that's great. We are down to introduction of new business. Is there any new business we need to put on our calendar or agenda for the future? Yes, ma'am.
I have one topic, an ex-officio military representative. So in the years past, we have had that military representative on this committee, and they have typically come from Camp Lejeune. We're several commanders past that, since we've had the absence of meeting with this organization since before Mr. Soka so graciously has come in and done such a great job. The National MIC3 Commission has assigned each of the 50 states to various service branches, and North Carolina has been assigned to the Marine Corps for oversight. So I have begun engaging our leadership with the possibility of that role being filled by us. There is language in the DOTI on the MIC3, that's 1342.29, that requires the military rep. And so I just wanted to find out from this commission if there were any particular guidelines on who needed to fill that role. And I just would like input on whether you guys would like me to go back and recruit to have that representation.
I'll just jump in on that one. This issue of the composition of this state council and making sure that we have all the right players here at the table is one that Dr. Mullinex and I just coincidentally have discussed within the last day, and I think both of us have actually had a chance to talk to Allison Schaefer, the General Counsel for DPI and the State Board, about this morning. Yeah, I just shared with Representative Loftus the general statute on the composition of the council, and the language there, representative from a military installation. So if that's a hole that we've had, and it sounds like that's the case, then I think in our conversations with Ms. Schaefer, State Superintendent, State Board, we'll make sure that position is filled. Along with, we're also lacking a superintendent, a local school superintendent from a district with a high concentration of military children. Again, just looking at the statute here, and it appears that these names are brought to the State Board of Education for their approval. Again, I would defer to Ms. Schaefer in her office as to exactly how that happens. I mean, my simple-minded notion was that the state superintendent would, bring those names to the state board. But I appreciate you bringing that to our attention, because, that is something we want to make sure we got all the players on the roster here. So, thank you.
That's good.
Anything else for new business?
Actually, we've had a compact issue come up in my school district, and it has not been resolved yet. The National Honor Society, the way the National Honor Society Constitution is written, it typically requires a student to have been on the campus the semester prior in order to apply for National Honor Society. There is the potential that school districts can add a provision that allows a new student to bypass that requirement so they can still do it. But the school has to then choose to put that language in their local constitution. We had a senior who came from my school district who inquired about joining National Honor Society and was told, since he wasn't here the semester prior and we could not verify his character, he was not eligible, which is a clear violation of the compact. I addressed it with the school, got a lot of pushback, very firm that this is what National Honor Society says. Obviously, I did my own research, reached out, said, hey, here's the provision. We can do this. Brought it up to the attention of my leadership. Said, well, go work with the school. In the end, there was a lot of pushback, and they finally agreed to at least, we'll give this kid a chance kind of thing, but only after they'd already called the student's school and asked if he had the ability to apply in the past and why he hadn't, rather than calling to verify his character, which when reaching out to the National Honor Society headquarters, they said was extremely inappropriate, because it doesn't matter why a student may not have applied in the past. You're looking at the student in the moment. So when he was finally given an application, he was given less than 48 hours to complete it, which means he would have to reach back to his other school and get letters of recommendation in that window. And the student at this point, this is like almost a month into this, of me going back and forth, just said, I'm done. He was a senior. He's like, I don't need this. We considered filing a formal complaint, but he was concerned that if he made too much of a stink, it would impact his younger sister, who was actually doing well at the school. So I did ask the parent to call. I know Nick went and did some research. I reached out to the national headquarters. I was very discouraged by what had happened, brought it back up to my senior leadership. And Moore County has a philosophy very much into principal autonomy, which I totally respect, and said, well, you've made it, the principal needs to work the issue. Go back to the principal. Principal says, hey, unless we're getting district leadership and we're holding everybody to the same standard, I'm not doing anything. So that for me is a concern, because it's not just a concern in my school district, because I guarantee this is happening everywhere, because the way the National Honor Society Constitution is written, which would probably be very similar to Beta Club's thing. So think about that, at your middle and your high school level, students who could be eligible when they walk in our doors aren't being given that opportunity to apply in the fall because they weren't through the previous semester.
Correct.
So it might be something that we need to consider providing some very specific guidance as a military-friendly school and as Purple Star school districts, that the expectation is you should review and update your bylaws to ensure they comply with the Interstate Compact of the state of North Carolina.
So would that, like you said, necessarily be for those military impacted schools?
It should be it should be every school district, not just military.
I'm just
yeah.
thinking, kids move all over. And how, for the DPI folks, this is some of the conversations we've ran into previously. How do we help that situation? We have no policy-making authority here where.
We don't need their own National Honor Society. That would be, the actual organization itself would create that. We can't.
Well, they have a provision you can add, but for us, what happened to the student is a clear violation of the Interstate Compact. The compact is very clear that the student should have been eligible to apply, regardless of what those local bylaws say. The state supersedes, that state law supersedes that. So from a military perspective, yes, National Honor Society does recommend that all transfer students are given that courtesy of waiving that 6-month requirement, but it's at the discretion of the school. But for military students, it's a clear violation of the law.
And sometimes the principal may be a little afraid to step out and do that because of repercussions that may come from above if it's floated up the chain. So that may be something we need more information of how we get that. Since there's a clause already there, it's just they need to implement it.
But they don't, but the thing is, unless they are told they have to, it's not going to happen.
Or unless they're given permission to do that.
They have been given
Like
permission from National Honor Society. In fact, National Honor Society at national level said they would actually work with MIC3 to address this issue, and actually was wondering if we could provide some recommendations on how to do it. But right now, I have my school district, who's a Purple Star school district, has not addressed it with any of our high schools, and it's in this limbo. So anyways, Nick, I'll let you.
Well, I appreciate the.
Nick big bucks.
Yeah. I appreciate the update from Ms. Sampson on that, and you know, it's an issue that bothers me. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud with you all. I mean, I'm not looking for ways to throw around my weight or anything, or try to use this title that I've been handed. But I mean, I'm happy to, if you give me the contact information, maybe reach out to the National Honor Society people, confirm all this, I don't doubt anything you said, but, just for me to hear it directly from them as the commissioner. And then again, I'm just thinking out loud with y'all. I mean, I could send an email to the superintendent saying, we had a state council meeting. This was a concern that was brought up. We've confirmed with the National Honor Society that it should not be a barrier. We don't think it should be a barrier under the compact, and we're just bringing this to your attention so that you can, share this with your principals as you see fit. But we would hope that you would support our military connected students. Something like that, just so at least folks are aware of it, and maybe even, in the individual case, just having it from the state level that might spur
I think it would be
people
helpful,
to.
because it would help all of us, because I guarantee if I were to look at the bylaws within my school district, this is probably not the only school that does this.
I'm sure you're correct.
I've not read our bylaws, but I've done, because we've had this conversation, I've done anecdotal conversations with schools, and even the school that was mentioned that would be partnered with the new WSTA, Eastern Wayne High School. They've been doing it for years, where yes, we'll take the previous schools, recommendations, they can come in.
Right.
But you're looking at a school that has had the same advisor, been doing this, who happens to be on the military affairs committee in the area. I mean, it's
Sensitized to it.
I think so. And so I think it presents itself with a situation where it's handled.
Well, and again, we find, I think increasingly, and your superintendent even mentioned it, that military families are just more dispersed. I mean, they're not
They
just clustered right outside the main gate. I mean, you got a lot of, in Moore County, Harnett, wherever, all around Fort Bragg. So, again, I'm happy to work with you
I'll forward you
and
the-
provide a
what-
communication like that if, you all feel like that's appropriate and would be helpful, so.
I do think having that to distribute to people, it gives them something that makes them feel better to fall back on, because truly they're trying to do the right thing.
Right,
So if they have
right.
one paper that says this, and they don't have the other paper that gives them a reason to give an exception, I do think that matters.
Yes.
Doug had talked about this with him coming back into place. Several years ago, we did Reach Every Military Child in North Carolina. And that's when we kind of spread a lot of information, because I think within it was done back in 2011. We went in, we provided all of the information that's applicable to our military families, because I see we are seeing a regression of information that our school administrators revisited. Here this summer, we had a military family to come in, and our boy and Dr. Molinex at that time, where a family came in from Florida. But I think it was Granville County or Franklin County wanted to charge this family tuition. $379.08, if my mind is bringing back, per child.
You remember specifically?
Yeah, that's how our minds work, I think, in this profession. But they wanted to charge them because they were buying a home in that county, but they had to stay in an extended stay. And so we were trying to tell them, okay, this is a military family. And so, because they're not familiar with the documents that we use for our military families, no, you don't understand. And then we'll have to work in the logistics of how we work with our military families. So I'm thinking, how do we work with our administrators to ensure that they know the documents that we need to have them familiar with? So having Doug once again come in as that link, and all of us working with our school district, all 115 of them, once again, to make sure that they have the needed information. Because once again, our military families are not going to come to the areas. All 115 of the school districts that we work with, our families, including our Reserve and National Guard, we have to make sure we're advocating for all of them.
Doug, thank you for being employed again by the. I didn't want you to assume some responsibility that you're kind of not in that arena as much now.
That's true. I'm not going to be in that same arena, but if it is pertaining directly to military installations, I can help in some way regarding that too. So, for me, going back to Reach Every Military Child, the idea was that you would have school liaison officers brief the regional leaderships in the different area on a frequency of maybe 6 months. Every 6 months, you go out and kind of give the kind of global regional folks an update on what's going on with the military folks. Okay. And that's really what that effort was. And then the actual school liaison officers took ownership in a region of the state to answer questions where there wasn't a military liaison counselor. So, they were actually kind of stepping outside the catchment area of their installations to try to help families that had questions, because there wasn't any kind of support mechanism there. I know that in the budget there's a new military liaison position. So I don't know, maybe if you can address what you guys are planning on doing with that. And there's 2 regional folks, I think, that were also funded in that budget as well.
I don't know anything about it. David, do you?
I'm sorry, I was trying to.
It was part of, it's actually on your December 3rd legislative update. It actually shows that it was approved within the budget. And so there were 3 positions, one a state level liaison, one for Onslow County, one for Cumberland County.
Yes.
That's the way it was written.
Yeah, and the general, as you get a person in a full-time role to address the military liaison issues, you would think that person would be the one to coordinate some of that activity between regional DPI staff and the school liaison officers or the military liaison counselors to kind of keep their awareness of what the issues are with those regional staff. And, I'm outside of that environment now, so it's up to you guys to kind of have that conversation now.
And do you happen to know if, she said it was on the legislative update, do you happen to know? Okay.
It was December 3rd, I checked.
This is not something that we've discussed, but.
That was going to be my statement about
And I would encourage.
general education.
It was from DPI, I can find it and send it to you.
It's from.
Just talking about that position for just a second too is one of the dreams we had back when we first kind of suggested it. This goes back to 2009, when I kind of got a little bit in over my head with the military liaison duties and the troops of teachers piece together was that, you know, there's this huge need out there for the school systems that don't have a big active duty population, the Reserve Guard, National Guard folks, to go do trainings out there like MSEC used to do those local trainings to school systems that don't have that kind of heavy population but still need to be aware of those issues for military kids across, you know, all the normal kind of deployment cycle pieces, the behavioral health issues related to that, and how to support them better, and to even access the other resources like yourselves, you know, that are more experienced with these issues if they need to. So to me, that would be a nice thing to add to the job description of that person once they end up getting hired.
So I think one thing to keep in mind is the turnover we have, because we've done a much better job, I think, in the last 6 months of meeting with our regional directors who are out in the field of all the state board regions. But unless, so like Rhonda, the superintendent in Franklin County, she doesn't have a high military population, right? And neither does her, you know, her staff aren't real familiar with military connected students. So no matter what the level, I think that's just something we need to be realistic about, is no matter what the level of outreach is that we have and our field-based DPI staff are aware, there will still be issues, because we have a lot of our state that has, you know, military connected kids. We have them all the way out in Cherokee County, but they just don't see the, you know, the day-to-day like we see here. So just to keep that in mind, that we can continue doing the outreach, which we need to do, but also, you know, just being realistic that won't stop the issues. We'll continue to have these. The other thing is any kind of documents like the National Honor Society, those types of documents where we're seeing a discrepancy of the national versus the district or school level, those are good documents for us to put on to the Purple Star Award application, because it forces them, just like the impact does, it forces them to read it and respond to it. So anytime though that we have those, we can add those into the application. Of course, will happen the next iteration around, so there will be a time lapse, but just keep that in mind to let me know when we have those, because I think that's a great one to add in. And I'm sure there's other ones out there, I just don't, we may not know about them until it becomes an issue.
Sometimes another one of those that happens, sometimes a Val or Sal for school, they have to have been at the school for a certain amount of time to be considered valedictorian, and that sometimes keeps military students from being considered, or top 10 honors and those kind of things. So we'd love to have flexibility where that was not a hindrance. So.
Didn't we talk one time about a young lady who was going to transferred in, and she was a cheerleader at a previous school, and because she wasn't there for the tryouts, they excluded her. We talked about the other what ifs.
Well, I think, you know, when you talk about having a state level position, one of the things that is advantageous to that is now you have somebody who can go and meet with the North Carolina High School Athletic Association and do hey, here is how the compact impacts your policies and where you might need to make provisions in your bylaws and educate your coaches. I know CTE has taken a very, they've actually really, from the state level, really started doing that, as looking at military populations as a specific population. I know Jamie and Valerie have presented them to them before, even presenting to your installation commander, so they understand how the compact works. You'd be surprised at how many families don't understand and what that, so that position really can be a good educator about what's out there. And the same thing of tracking those legislative updates. So when we have things like, you know, military families can enroll with PCS orders without proof of residency. When I say enroll, that means kids pick out their classes and we finish the process. We don't wait for them to arrive. Then that is something that position can help, so that, yes, when you're way out, you know, I mean, I have military families in every part of my school district, but, you know, I have schools that only have 2 active duty kids way out in northern Moore. So they don't always know, but they know who to call if they have a question.
Right.
And so really educating that when you have that one-off, if you don't know what to do, who do you call? And where do you find that information? And then sending out those updates so that your superintendents are, which, by the way, Superintendent Truitt has actually done that recently. She sent out a great newsletter a couple months ago that actually did that. It was the first time I've seen it in 4.5 years I've been in this position. Jamie, I mean, you've been doing this way longer than the rest of us. So from a DPI perspective, as a military family member, this is the first time that I've ever seen really at this level North Carolina being purposeful
Correct.
When it comes to public education and trying to get it right. Yeah, we have a long ways to go, but the progress we've made in 4 years or 5 years, I mean, Jamie and Valerie started this years ago. I mean, they've really, and Brittany, I mean, you know, they've really put that footprint in there. And then even from the SLO perspective, the collaboration that now occurs across installations at this level, we've moved a lot of things forward, but I think that state position. So when I have a problem at the local level and I call about National Honor Society, I have somebody who can make that phone call down to the superintendent and just be like, hey, listen, you probably need to correct this. Or to walk that principal through why we need to, you know, hey, it doesn't have to be the same credit. This would be an acceptable swap. You know, all those little things that are one-offs, that's what that state position can do and save us all a lot of time and energy.
Yes. Well, I think now I can tell you that I voted on legislation to help the North Carolina Athletic Association become more user-friendly. And now that they have some forced agreement they're working on with DPI, we've been trying to get one of those people to come to our meeting for at least 5 to 7 years. So now that I'm here in town more often, I may make the trip as representative office to invite them personally to come and be part of our team. So that's a critical thing. We run into that a lot with athletics, cheerleading, stuff like that they have an active role. So I'm so glad you guys, DPI, will now have a direct part. But I can tell you, when I contact them, it's like they don't have a clue. Now, they may have a clue, a little more persuasion, so to speak. But that's a good point, Jamie.
We did have a great meeting. We presented some slides about the compact to Q Tucker. And
she's very open to.
Yes, and she was very receptive, as well as there was a principal on the phone as well, Jerry from Craven County. And we're very open to that and working through particular cases, scenarios, things of that sort. But the slides that we presented to them were ready-made where they could actually share them with districts as well, with particulars about the compact. So any strides we can make.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other new business planned for? Yes, ma'am.
Well, let me pick this off. I do like to share, as we see sitting around the table, we do have one missing piece. It's Pope Air Force Base. Pope is a tenant of Fort Bragg. They house about 5,000 airmen, and that's not counting the military families that they have. They have decided that they're not going to have a school liaison officer. So with that being said, we're not going to leave them out. They're our military families. Fort Bragg has adopted that tenant, so we are going to be the school liaison officers for Pope Air Force Base, because they should be sitting at the table, but they're not. So we want to make sure you all would be aware of that we're going to be able to support them, and we're going to adopt that tenant, so we will make sure our families' needs are met.
Cool.
Are they still going to provide EFMP support for
They
their
will only
families?
do that.
Okay.
That's the only thing that
All right.
they will do.
Camp Lejeune is also supporting the Coast Guard station at Elizabeth City, so we've been providing
Okay.
them with Purple Star information, and because they also don't have a school liaison, so.
Wonderful. Anything else? Is there anyone here for public comment today? Is there anyone online that would like to be part of the public comment? Seeing and hearing none. Chair updates. Well, you saw it today. What a great update. I am just so thankful to have DPI so engaged at this level now. You guys are a critical part that we've been needing for a long, long time. Thank you so much for enduring this hour and almost 2-hour meeting with us. We normally try to go 10 to 12. Today we were catching up from COVID from 1.5 years ago, so thank you for bearing with us. Next meeting we've usually scheduled sometime in March, April in the past. So we'll be looking at, is April a better time, maybe?
March.
Yeah,
April's
March.
busy.
Stay away from spring break.
Okay, so.
Well, that means
the military child.
And you do want to maybe look earlier in March, because some of our spring breaks do start at the end of March. 'Cause I
Okay.
think more counties
So,
want
so
to.
1 through 15, somewhere
would
in
be-
that timeframe,
I think
would that
that'd
be,
be perfect.
be good? Okay, so we'll send out some dates, we'll get Nick to kind of coordinate his calendar and look ahead.
Purple Up Day, just to mark your calendar, is April 8th. We've all agreed to that date, April 8th.
So we'd love to see it be the state. Purple
April
Up Day.
8th.
April 8th is
Okay.
our Purple Up Day.
Okay.
I'm gonna work with Kelly at DMVA. We may send out a possible shirt ordering website. Yeah. So TBD.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else?
No, this has been great.
Thank you so much.
I just want to share special thanks, send them out to Dr. Mullinex for all
Yes.
the work.
Absolutely.
Great job.
Making this possible.
You get front row parking next week.
I get the garage parking. That's the coveted parking.
Well, if nothing else, our meeting will stand adjourned. Thank you so much for participating and traveling to the big town of Raleigh today. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Great job.